Hello, I'm Emily Wilson, the Development Director at MB Associates, and this is the Climate Action Fund learning resource for engaging diverse communities. It's aimed at people who are running Climate Action Fund projects and want to engage with different communities. It goes over some of the main do's and don'ts, and there's some of the early learning from some of the projects in the cohort at the moment. What do we mean by a diverse community? The UK has a rich and diverse population, meaning that our communities and population differ in lots of different ways by race, ethnicity, religious beliefs, socio-economic status, language, geographical origin, gender, sexual orientation, and physical and learning abilities. Being successfully diverse means bringing these people together with their different knowledge, background, experiences, and interests. When it comes to climate action, we want to work with and influence and support everyone positively. However, to bring new people into the conversation about climate action, there is a balancing act to make sure that the topic feels important and urgent enough for people to give it their attention, while not making it seem so big and complex that people feel it isn't even worth trying. It's also really important to acknowledge that historically a lot of climate action has happened with affluent and middle class communities who have a lot of social capital. We need to rebalance this, but sensitively and without transferring responsibility to communities who already have multiple and complex challenges. This learning resource shares some of the do's and don'ts that have been shared by projects who are working in this area, and then it goes into some case studies on 3 of those projects and shows what activities they've been doing successfully to engage with diverse communities in their area. Starting with things that it's really important to definitely do when engaging with diverse communities. First and foremost, consider why you're doing this engagement in the first place, and then make sure that that practice is embedded across the organisation and isn't just the responsibility of one person. This needs to be something that's embedded across the whole organisation, from the bottom to the top, and everybody needs to be on board with the level of commitment that this kind of work takes. Secondly, do your research. What support organisations and networks already exist? There will be people who already have relationships with the communities that you are trying to engage with, and so it's really important that you start relationships with them. Recognise that they're the experts, especially if they've been working in the community for a long time, and that they're the true conduits to the people, and that you can learn from each other. Work with and recruit people who have community engagement skills and recognise that they might not be climate experts. Much of this work is about relationship building, and the first point of call will not be about climate, it will be about the things that are important to the communities themselves. Do consider location. Go to where the people are and don't expect them to come to you. And start with their issues. Ask questions. What is important to them? What are the challenges in their area? You need to listen to these answers and respond to them, rather than going in with your own agenda. The climate change conversations will come. Consider your language, tone, and context in all communications, be they verbal or written. And invest time to build relationships and trust. This is not a quick process. Community engagement on this level takes a long time. And finally, appreciate that yours is not the only time that is valuable, and the people who are giving them time, their time to talk to you, should be recompensed. This doesn't necessarily have to be payment, but it could cover costs of getting there, or an additional type of payment such as vouchers or free activities. The case studies that we go into later in this presentation will pull out some more of these do's and how people have used them in actual projects. And moving on to the things that we really don't want to happen. Don't underestimate the budget implications. As we've mentioned before, this kind of work takes time. It takes time to build relationships, to make sure that things are accessible, to get the language right, to provide the additional support, and to recompense people for their time. This all adds up to a significant amount of resource and needs to be budgeted at the beginning of projects so that you're asking for the right funding in the first place. Don't necessarily start off conversations about climate change. You need to start with the issues that are important to those communities and work together to build on what the climate change message might be. There are lots of co-benefits that happen that will cover the issues for people in the communities, as well as having climate positive changes. Don't overburden disadvantaged communities. Remember that often these communities already have a relatively low carbon footprint, so what can others learn from them? And don't use jargon. Sometimes even words like climate, green, campaigning or activism can actually present barriers for people to engage with you. To create this resource, we talked to 3 different organisations who are working with Climate Action Fund: the Bristol Green Partnership, All One Collective and DEG in Wales. We'll go through each of these case studies, pulling out some of the main learning and the key activities that they've been using in order to engage with diverse communities. We'll start off with Bristol Green Partnership, which was founded in 2007 as a unique partnership of over 1,000 member organisations who are committed to working in Bristol to make it a sustainable city with high quality of life for everybody. At the time of speaking to Bristol Green Partnership, they were working towards being a carbon neutral and nature-rich city, increasing the understanding of environmental inequality and becoming a gold sustainable food city, and also working towards becoming a circular city with a circular economy. To achieve these priorities, engaging with diverse communities was fundamental to the partnership to ensure that it's fully inclusive and representative of the city of Bristol. And there's a quote here from one of the partners. Climate action has a history of creating new barriers for disabled people and of leaving us out of the conversation. Our plan shows that by including disabled people, there are simple, actionable ways that we can make our cities fairer and better for both the planet and everyone who lives in them. And here are some of the key activities that the Bristol Green Partnership has been doing in order to engage with diverse communities. The first thing is one of the key learnings that we pulled out earlier about finding the right community partners, the conduits between you and the people in the community. Bristol Green Partnership have made sure that each different community that they've identified has a designated community partner. For example, Bristol Disability Equality Forum, working with people with disabilities. Bristol Green Partnership make sure that they meet people in their spaces to have conversations about their issues, be this fuel poverty, food poverty, social isolation, and they found that these lead to conversations about climate change, but that's not where they start. A very important activity has been bringing people together for free community feasts, as food is a really great leveller and starts lots of conversations. They've been working with artists to bring creativity to the conversation. And there are some examples that we can link to online and a blog post. Using as many different varied ways of engaging with people, Bristol Green Partnership have also produced a podcast with people from an inner city adventure playground. They've taken a sofa, table and cake and toured it around community centres and shopping centres in order to start informal climate-themed conversation, particularly with members of the disabled community. During the pandemic, when it was really difficult to get people physically together, they created children's art kits that were climate-themed, and they included notes about the partnership in order to start raising the awareness as this was when this project was really kicking off, but at a time when actually everybody was completely unable to get together. They've been hosting events such as sewing socials and school uniform exchanges in community centres to encourage repair and reuse of clothing, which saves people money and ultimately has climate action attached to it too. And they've also hosted regular climate theme shows on local radio stations. So a really varied amount of different activities that would engage different members of the community and in different ways. Some of the key learning from Bristol Green Partnership has included the relationship building, and we've touched on this already about how long it can take to build those relationships. And because of the time that Bristol Green Partnership were working to start with during the pandemic, it was even more challenging. And they did adapt to digital formats and came up with different ways of doing that, such as the children's art kits. But there were restrictions because of digital poverty as well. They make sure that the partners are the right partners and that they're working with people who really care and won't let communities down. Organisations that already have trust and have worked with the community over many years and therefore are the experts and understand those communities really, really well. They recognise the inequality of climate action and that a lot of climate action is seen as expensive and elitist. And they're making sure that they never create a situation where climate action is actually making people's lives worse. There's also an exception that you can never include everyone. But they do the best they can to remove as many barriers as possible. And remember that there's only so much time and so much money. So don't be too hard on yourself. Accessibility is key when it comes to trying to engage with different types of communities. Bristol Green Partnership translate their plans and communications into all the languages that are spoken within their communities, including British Sign Language. And they create easy read versions of their plans as well. They share their learning. They audit and acknowledge skills, experience, and the networks that they have, and they identify the gaps and invest time in filling them with training, mentoring, and capacity building. They make sure they find out what they don't know and they build that into their budget to make sure that the gaps are resourced. For example, they may not be experts with working in a certain community, but they'll make sure that they get the right training and support so that they can be. And they accept that their existing partners know so much and that they can learn so much from them, and that that's a two-way street and their partners can learn from them in exchange. A significant part of Bristol Green Partnership's learning has been enabling them to believe in themselves and their partners, and that they deserve a seat at the table, that they are also experts, and that they can be bold and confident because what they have to say is worth saying. They've developed this really strong narrative, and they stick to that, and they share that with their partners, so that that narrative is coming across really, really strongly. They know that they can't get to net zero without them. Moving on to our next case study, DEG, who are based in Wales. They're a social enterprise supporting community-led action across northwest Wales, which is a really rural area. It's an area that's relatively low, has low wages, but where fuel prices are particularly high, and so there are high rates of fuel poverty. DEG are looking at solutions alongside the communities that can balance the economic need with allowing communities to flourish and protect the environment. To work together with local communities, DEG follow an asset-based approach to engagement and are hosting 20 citizens' assemblies across 5 different areas. It's a largely rural geographic area of northwest Wales, and the 5 locations have been identified to host citizens' assemblies. Each area is based around a town or a village and has a member of staff. And through following an asset-based approach, their first role was to talk to local people and organisations and map out the assets. Based on this mapping, a lot of time and resource was spent on reaching out to people to invite them to apply to be part of the assemblies. This meant going to where the people were, including men's sheds, rugby clubs, WIs, and delivering an invitation to every single household via the Royal Mail, which took a significant amount of budget. The team created a sense of excitement and desire to be involved. DEG invested in a dedicated communications manager who did all the social media coverage, and they ended up getting quite a lot of media coverage on BBC Wales. Once people had registered their interest, the team made sure that there was representation from all facets of the community at the assemblies. This did not mean matching percentages of the population. Since ethnic diversity in the area is low, this would have resulted in less than one person on the assembly. As you cannot have part of a person, it meant ensuring that there was someone to represent all communities, from refugees and asylum seekers to homeless people and those with poor health. The team spent time figuring out how to make the assemblies accessible to everyone. In some cases, however, an individual may be the only representative of a group in that area, and so whether or not that individual was asked to be part of the assembly was dependent on the relationship and the context, and each individual was taken in its own right. DEG have taken lots of learning from the first phase of their project, including the need to be truly accessible. This meant considering the location of the assemblies, making sure that their locations were physically accessible and that people can travel easily to them. And where transport is difficult, potentially because of the rurality, each community partner has at least one electric vehicle, if not more, including minibuses, which were available for community hire, and they used these to transport people to and from the assemblies. For those who have low literacy levels, they made sure that it was possible for them to engage by offering support and help. They could bring someone with them if they wanted to. They were sure to remove as many barriers as possible, including the cost of attending. Citizens receive £25 for each assembly they attend and an extra £100 if they attend all four as an incentive to keep on coming. The assemblies were all set up as hybrid events, being face-to-face and online, to allow people who cannot leave their homes to attend as well. They did a special reach out to young people because they'd struggled to engage with 16 to 25-year-olds. So they did particular work with sixth forms and colleges and were going into schools to do assemblies. Getting the communications right. Previously, most climate action had been communicated in English. DEG are foremost a Welsh-speaking company, and so all their communications happen in Welsh. Tone is as important as language, and it depends who you're talking to and the context in which you're communicating. And therefore, having a member of staff in each area which knows those communities really well meant that that context happened. Engagement works best when it's done by people from that community, so they recruited specifically from the communities that they were working with so that they would know the local people and understand the area. They were also really careful about their language in terms of trying not to alienate people by coming across as too much of a climate activist and people perceiving that as being a bunch of hippies. These are the words of Grant from DEG, they're not my words. But it's, again, that comes back to really knowing the communities and that recruitment from within the community so that people know the language to use and how to engage people and how to motivate them to attend. Just like with Bristol Green Partnership, DEG are sure to start with the issues that matter to the community. For example, when trying to engage with farmers, they asked what's important in the area because we want to learn from you. And then they make sure that they listened. Getting the resources right. Engaging people who across diverse communities takes time, and there are no shortcuts, and it's not always easy. You need to allow time for relationships to develop and to listen to the community and to feed back. DEG points out that when a team is passionate, particularly about climate change, the instinct is really to start with that. And so there's quite a skill in actually sitting back and listening to what the communities need and want, and not jumping in with your own agenda. And finally, it's really important to not underestimate the budget and staff costs needed for this kind of work to get it right, and so that you can fundraise for the right amount of money in the first place. The final case study in this resource is All One Collective and Lab, which is a social enterprise based in Todmorden. They work with communities to build knowledge and skills to enable people to take social action on the issues that are important to them. Their approach focuses on increasing political literacy, the development of well-being and self-care tools, and the practical skills needed to influence, such as leadership and public speaking. They have expertise in working with diverse and disadvantaged communities, and since 2019 have been developing work to engage Calderdale communities on the issues of climate change and climate justice. This emerged out of All One Collective's delivery of a climate change-focused Active Citizens programme, when they began to explore the barriers that people from low-income and marginalised communities face to engaging with the issues of climate change. This included an online climate justice event with a local community and voluntary sector organisations to begin exploring the intersections between poverty, inequality and climate change in the local context. All One Collective is currently working in partnership with the Climate Challenge College at Todmorden Learning Centre and Community Hub to raise awareness of climate change with a particular focus on bringing less heard and more diverse voices into the climate change conversation. They aim to raise awareness of climate change and explore its relevance to people's lives in low-income areas, to promote awareness of the green economy, green jobs and the green futures course at the college, and to work with the voluntary and community sector organisations to raise awareness of climate justice and explore options for next steps with regards to learning skills development and taking action on climate change. Their 3 key activities include climate conversations with voluntary and community sector organisations. They've been delivering workshops to a wide range of voluntary and community sector organisations to explore how their current work with community links with climate change and climate justice. This has included using the dialogue approach that was promoted by Climate Outreach to run workshops on effective approaches to talking about climate change. They've also been running events in disadvantaged areas, working in partnership with North Halifax Partnership and Halifax Opportunities Trust. These events focus on what's important to local people. They're about having fun and making connections while exploring how climate and the environment relate to their everyday lives through conversation, food and creative activities. For an example, there was an event where local people were particularly concerned about waste. The event included a meal provided by the Real Junk Food Project, an art workshop using junk, a community litter pick, face painting, a vintage litter display and sustainable goodie packs including bamboo toothbrushes. There were lots of conversations about the local area and what it would make to make it a better place. All One Collective have also been running climate champion sessions with students to build their confidence and skills in talking about their course and influencing others. The learning from this project so far has focused on partnership working, because working in partnership is essential for working with diverse and disadvantaged communities. As we've mentioned before, local community organisations know the community so well and have those established relationships and trust and understand the local context best. Voluntary and community organisations want to know how to have conversations about climate change in their organisations and with their communities, but they don't always know where to start, and so there's an opportunity and potential for skills building. To do this, All One Collective have been using the donor economics visual as a representation of the connection between the social and the environmental, and they found this a really good learning support and discussion and relevant to their work. Secondly, they've focused on relationship building. Building the relationships with community organisations and community leaders is key and doesn't just happen at the start. It's an ongoing process that needs resourcing throughout for significant impact. It takes time and it takes consistency. And having conversations about climate change. Again, we've mentioned various times throughout this presentation that conversations don't necessarily start about climate change. You have to ask open questions and listen to what people feel is relevant to them. Using dialogue skills for talking to people about climate change has been really helpful for All One Collective. This involves active listening, open questions, empathy, and finding common ground and shared experiences. And finally, being sensitive about behaviour change messages and make sure that they're reflective of the local context and people's lived realities. I'd like to say thank you to Amy Harrison from Bristol Green Capital Partnership, from Grant Paisley from DEG, and from Hilary Turley from the All One Collective and Lab for their generous time in giving me the information for this resource. There is on this slide a list of additional links and information from which some of the facts and figures have been pulled for this presentation. I hope you found the resource helpful. Thank you very much for your time.